Welcome to Comfortable Conversations. I'm your host, Jazz Kirk, where we dive into the idea that the greatest gift life can offer us is discomfort. These honest yet comfortable conversations we will have are essential as your life is your canvas. In each episode, I will share practical wisdom and personal stories that guide you through life's biggest questions, encouraging growth, self-discovery, and deeper connections in your everyday life. Today's guest I have is the beautiful Devyn Walker. If you have not heard of her or met her yet, after this episode, you're probably going to be like, follow, share, all things Devyn. She is a phenomenal woman, business owner, therapist, Black woman in our community, trailblazing for people of color. So welcome, Devyn.
Thank you for having me. That was such a sweet introduction. Thank you.
How are you doing today?
I'm great. Just doing the things.
All of the things. Mm-hmm. Life is just beautiful. It's kind of a gloomy day here today. Mm-hmm. So I'm also like, boo, blah, but also.
No, we are transitioning into the winter blues, honey. We have to get adjusted.
I know. It's my season of adjustment typically is like end of summer. Mm-hmm. Like for some reason that is like my transition is like sooner, and I'm like August, September, October. By October I'm like, all right,
you're good.
You're good.
October 1st early.
Every year, October 1st, I'm like, oh, thank God. I don't know what was happening.
Yeah, mine hits around November 1st.
So. But Devyn, the first question I have for you is, what discomfort has led to this amazing woman who sits in front of me?
I will say the discomfort that has led me to where I'm at today is really putting my mental health first and truly learning myself and learning how I fit in the world and how to fulfill God's purpose while doing all that.
Okay. So when you talk about mental health, where did that journey start?
I would say my mom would tell you I was always interested in like behavioral health, like behaviors of others. Like someone would be crying and I'm like, Mama, why are they sad?
Yeah.
Like I was always that type of person. So it's always been an interest of mine. But growing up, coming from like a small town, I didn't know that was a career.
Yeah.
So I really never thought about it. I just always thought, oh, I'm going to be like a registered nurse, something like that. But so I feel like it was always a part of me. But where it truly started was when my father died by suicide. And I was the one that actually found him. And he also made me like his beneficiary. So I had to plan the funeral and all that at the age of 19. And as you can imagine, right after that, I experienced my own mental health diagnosis, PTSD, anxiety, depression, and I had to figure out how to treat that.
Yeah.
So that's where it started.
So just to bring it back, what small town are you from?
I'm from Texarkana, Texas. The Texas side, not the Arkansas side.
From Chicago.
Okay.
I'm like, I don't know.
It's a twin city. Texarkana is a twin city.
But they know it.
Yeah, they know what I'm talking about.
They know what you mean. But so you said like being from such a small town, how can like older Devyn now speak to baby Devyn about like what careers look like? Because I think that's the first thing I'm like, nurse is like the career you were like, that's what we're aspiring to be. Can you kind of unpack like that childhood, seeing that, what you actually saw? You had a level of empathy and like you wanted to connect with people early on.
Yeah. So back, like I said, Texarkana is a small town, right? So there's not many careers. So when they say you have a good job at the chicken plant.
What?
Like, yeah, okay. It wasn't many careers. Or you're a teacher, something like that. But it wasn't, you know how like we're like executives and all types of things. It's not like that in Texarkana still. Like people are still working, like people I've gone to high school with. I'll go to the drive-thru at McDonald's and they're working there. They're like the manager. So, but that's still considered a good job. You know what I
So
mean?
you really weren't exposed to different industries, different opportunities as a Black woman. How did that, like, the people you admire and aspire, did it feel like they were either on TV or in the magazines or like unreachable, untouchable?
I didn't have anybody I looked up to.
So what inspired you? Where did you get this like moment where you're like, I want to become a therapist?
So it wasn't many role models. Like, I don't know. It just wasn't. But it was people that left Texarkana that I saw went to college and things like that. I'm like, oh, okay, I want to do that. I just knew I was meant for something different than I was receiving in my hometown. So I left. And after my dad passed, well, before my dad passed, he put it in my head, he was like, you're going to be a nurse, you're going to be a nurse, you're going to be a nurse. So I started going to school for that. But the way that anatomy class was set up,
Girl, same.
I was like, I can't
like,
do
blood.
that.
I don't think I can see blood all the time. I was like, ugh.
Exactly. And also they had like a program in high school where we could become a CNA. So I did become a CNA in high school, and I did that for a little bit, and I was just like, this is not my ministry, like, at all. So my dad wanted me to be an RN, but after that happened, one interesting thing happened before he passed. It's like I knew I had like an instinct, and this was before I had any clinical training, took any psychology class. I've never known anybody take their own life, but I literally asked him, "Are you about to like kill yourself?" And of course he said no.
Was this days before, hours before?
Hours before.
Okay.
So I left after that. But going back to your question, after that I decided that I wanted to be a therapist. Because I remember I told him before, I think I may want to be a therapist. And he was like, you don't want to listen to people's problems all day. So I kept my major as like nursing. But after that situation, I feel like we need more Black therapists. I don't even know a Black therapist. So I decided to become a therapist.
Okay. And so when you talk about like your dad's suicide, my brother also lost his life to suicide. I was the one who was pretty much got to the scene when it happened. I never saw the body because just based on the situation, but a lot of the work I do stemmed from, okay, this very traumatic situation happened, but I personally, there was a sense of peace that I was like, okay, my brother's in a really good place. This was his decision. I honor that, but I'll honor his life with my life. I will heal me for me. And so I would love to hear, like, your father's life sounds like it was a great inspiration of like, aha, this purposeful, meaningful work that I do unfortunately had to touch me first. But do you, like, I always feel weird to say like God was there for some reason in that moment.
Same. That is my same point of view, and people think it's so interesting that I have that point of view. Like, energy never dies, it just transfers. And I agree that was my dad's decision, and I honor it. And it's just like any other untreated illness. If cancer is left untreated, it can lead to death. Yeah. If depression is left untreated, it can lead to death. It's the same thing. So, same. Yeah. We're here on that one. I kind of lost the question, though. What was the question?
No, it was just like that being the thing that like kind of helped you on your trajectory. I know suicide is a very hard conversation within the Black community. If you were coming from a small town, like personally, our family, when my brother passed, I remember an auntie saying like, stop telling people he committed suicide. And I was like, hey, auntie, like, we got a funeral coming up. What are we supposed to say?
Yeah.
And like even the pastor at the funeral, he really was intentional about talking about suicide and the Bible and correlating. So I also wonder, like, with you coming from a small town, how did that feel? You did share you had to, take care of his arrangements and things. But when you think about the Black community accepting and that age that you were in, because this was several years back, so it's not 2024 we're talking about, where not that suicide is normalized in our
Mm-hmm.
communities, but it at least is a conversation we're starting to be really intentional about
Mm-hmm.
having and be like aware, like this is serious.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, a lot of people didn't want to talk about it either. They didn't. They would say things. White people don't do stuff like that, but
Yeah.
they do more often than you think they do.
Yeah.
And it definitely touched me and my work in a way of it made me look at my family history on
Mm.
especially on my dad's side. Then I started looking on my mom's side. So at the time, my dad was in San Diego. My dad was in the Navy. So when it happened, we were in San Diego. So none of my family was there. I was there up there by myself.
Okay.
So it made me look at his family. He was estranged from his family. Very traumatic childhood. He basically raised himself and raised his little brother as well. I think he just kind of got to the end of his fight in his rope, like when he decided to do it. And it made me look at my side, my mom's side of the family too, and how we struggle with generational trauma and all the things. And it literally, all this goes back to literal slavery, like
Yeah.
literally. And it just made me want to break those generational curses. And I think people look at, like, we need financial literacy and we need this and we need that. But even to get to the point where we're managing our money, our mental health has to be fine. Because if you are struggling with your mental health, you may struggle with impulsive spending.
Yeah.
You may not even want to get out of bed to work to make money. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So it impacted me in that way. So even though I wouldn't consider myself necessarily a suicide advocate, I guess in a way that I am, because suicide advocacy is really just making sure people have access to like medical insurance, food, things like that. That's really suicide prevention. It just made me really want to focus on breaking those generational cycles, with that being mental health diagnosis within the Black community.
But you started with yourself. In order to do the work, you were like, I got to do the work.
Well, I kind of started with myself and my career at the same time.
Okay, what do you mean by career?
So I started school. Yeah, I started school. I got my bachelor's, and then I'm also a yoga teacher.
Okay.
So I've been a yoga teacher for 10 years.
Okay.
This year makes 10 years, which
Congrats.
is crazy. Thank you. So I started my career with me being a yoga teacher. So I would speak like to people through like yoga poses and like kind of connect the mental health thing. Like that's how I started. That's how I built my following. So I was doing all that, and I was also working on myself. I'm still working on myself. I'm still figuring.
ING. It's a constant unfolding. So,
girl, I'm tired. I'm just like, okay, how many things do I have to work through? But yeah, so I've been working on myself and my career, being a therapist, being a mental health advocate, like at the same time.
And you do a lot of community-based things for people of color.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that so intentional and important for you?
Because we don't have a lot of spaces like that. I'm sure you can attest to being able to go to like a Pilates studio and you being the only person of color in the class.
Yeah.
And I think we're used to being on those spaces and we're used to navigating it. But for someone who is just getting their mental health together and they're deciding to start their fitness journey and they go to their first yoga or Pilates class and they realize they're the only Black person there, it can be very intimidating. And it can also be, it can be some studios that are not that welcoming and they don't realize it. It's not like they're intentionally being that way, but we know how it works. We know how class starts. We know that because we're experiencing that. But a lot of people of color don't know. So I wanted to create this space for it to be kind of like a intro space for not just therapy, but also for these yoga classes and exploring these different like exercise formats, these mindful movements. So they can go to these other studios and know how to navigate the space.
So when it comes to mental health, how do you differentiate mental health, mental wellness? Like, do you feel like there's a bit of a stigma when it comes to mental health?
How can I answer this? So I think social media has done a great job with decreasing the mental health stigma by promoting awareness.
Okay.
But two opposite things can be true at once.
Okay.
But I've also think it's done a lot of harm. I think we're very aware of it, but people are also still have really big misunderstandings around it. And it's becoming where we don't discriminate to people against it, but I think we are getting in the zone of where we're weaponizing mental health terms and mental health diagnosis and using it as an excuse rather than an explanation.
What do you mean? Like, give an example.
The whole trend with everyone having like ADHD, and then they'd be like, oh, I'm neurodivergent, so I just don't know how to communicate. I think people are forgetting that the point of a diagnosis is for you to get a treatment plan and for you to get it treated. I think people are getting diagnosis or saying they have a diagnosis, not being properly diagnosed, and just using it as an excuse rather than using it as an explanation and then getting the appropriate treatment to learn how to manage your symptoms.
Okay. But so when you bring up social media, and I get what you say when it's like it can be really, really great, but still have its, harmful aspects. Do you feel like, when you think about accessibility to therapy resources, do you feel like that's difficult for people to obtain and achieve versus like you have a 15-second clip of, oh, I relate to what this person is saying. I think I'm that. And people are self-diagnosing.
I could be biased.
Okay.
I do think therapy is accessible now.
Okay. Why do you say that? Let's start there.
There's a lot of resources out there that'll pay for therapy. We have community mental health programs. Now, will you get top grade A therapy? No, but you got to start somewhere where you're at least venting to someone, right?
Right.
And then once you kind of work on these mental health things, maybe you'll get more energy to work and get more income. And then you can try to go to the next level of therapist where you can afford it. Like you can pay more out of pocket. Like, you know what I mean? I do think it's more accessible because there are a lot of resources out there. But like you said, the instant gratification in that 15-second clip where people can relate to, it's helpful. It's good. You know what I mean? But I also think when you have certain diagnoses, you do have that lack of motivation and that fatigue. And I think in that aspect, it's not accessible. So some people may sign up for therapy. We have it all the time at Transcend. People will sign up for therapy and they see the documentation they have to fill out and never do it.
Yeah, it gives them, some people get anxiety. You're like, oh, there's a lot of questions.
Yeah, and it's free. Like the insurance pays for it. So I don't think there's some barriers still as far as accessibility, as far as like, of course, paying for it, but we do have a lot of resources now that will pay for it. Like, even us, we just launched a program where we will help people pay for therapy and like their co-pays and deductibles and stuff like that. It's a lot of programs out there like that. And there's free mental health services out there, but you actually have to have the motivation to look for it.
But do you feel like it's motivation, or do you also feel like it's the education and awareness? Because we both know there are resources. And when I think about accessibility, sometimes it is like what you don't know, you don't reach for. When I was living in Chicago, I remember meeting this woman who had never been over the bridge to go to the lake. And it was just like a mile long. Or you meet people who they stay in their same neighborhood their entire life. So how do you help? That's the stigma that I talk about. Like, how do they know it's there, but they can't connect to it because it's not common to them, or it's not something they've seen someone do. So all they can, connect with it is through TV or through someone else telling them. But how do you help someone see their inner work, their inner child, their inner traumas and triggers to then go get help? And like you said, there are a lot of resources, but how do you help someone see that for themselves?
I think social media is one. I don't know if you notice, a lot of mental health professionals, they're shifting from making content about like self-diagnosing, but more so like, let's say you're struggling with sleep. How would you cope with that? So it's more so like coping with things, and then also just like more informational. And also with like free community events. So, we do a lot of community events. And when we do these events, we talk about these resources. We talk about these things. So it's really just like going into those communities and providing these free resources and educating them, and just kind of meeting them where they're at.
Okay, awesome. And then when it comes to mental health and mental wellness, like you are a mental health expert, my
Mm-hmm.
practice is more so mental wellness. What
Mm-hmm.
differences do you see within that?
Mental health, man, I really don't see any differences. I think it's
Okay,
one and the same. I think it's just
really?
what you prefer to use. Um, Mental health in general, it consists of like a mind body connection. So feeding your body and your mind, because what impacts the mind also impacts the body and vice versa. So I think that's really just the foundation of mental health and mental wellness.
Okay, I love that. A lot of times I look at, mental wellness fitting, mental health fitting in the entire ecosystem of mental wellness. When
Mm-hmm.
you think of your mental health, financial health,
Mm-hmm.
physical health, like all of those coming together to
Mm-hmm.
create that ecosystem of well being and lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I sometimes differentiate it
Mm-hmm.
because even when you think of self care, a lot of times people think of they're taking care of and pampering themselves as their self care versus
Mm-hmm.
actually going to therapy or sitting alone or solitary, like little
Mm-hmm.
practices like that. So how do you help people differentiate those things like self care?
I differentiated through like that's treating yourself.
Right.
Getting massages and stuff like that. That's treating yourself. Self care should be free. So if like self care is preventative, and you can also use it in the moment when you are experiencing anxiety and things like that. So it can be as simple as putting your face in a bowl of ice water to help regulate your nervous system. It can be as simple as going for a walk and making sure you get sunlight every day. That is self care.
But how does someone choose that? Oh, like, because I feel like there are a lot of norms that self-care is taking yourself to
Mm-hmm.
do something for your physical body
Mm-hmm.
versus like actually internal work.
Mm. I think internal work, as far as like you talking about like therapy and working on
No, like
yourself.
even when you talk about the ice bowl, like that's regulating your body. Like
Mm-hmm.
you're not realizing, but someone may go get their lashes done or their hair done, and that is their self care for that thing.
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
Because I've had people say, I'd be like, that's not self care. Getting your nails done is not self care. And then people have shared, like, but this helps the blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay, I can see that perspective. But how
Yeah.
do we educate people and you kind of shared this it's not about doing something, but we're programmed to think we are supposed to be doing
Mm-hmm.
something versus not.
Yeah. That product. We always gotta think we gotta be productive. I would say self care is not about doing, but it's more so about being. It's about being present, and those things that you're doing that's helping you be present is self care. Me personally, I think mindfulness and being present is literally the key to life.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's the answer of everything to everything. You can't be balanced. You can't have too much of anything. You can't be too far in the future. You can't be too far in the past. So if getting your nails done helps you stay present where you're not thinking about everything else, okay, I guess it is self-care for you. But it costs money. But self-care can be free.
Yeah.
It can be something as simple as you going to touch grass,
Yeah.
putting your feet in the ground, and you connecting with your senses. That's what self-care is. Self-care is about being present and being.
Yeah. My favorite mindfulness practices like going for a walk with my cup of coffee in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's it. That's all. I get 30
We be
minutes.
seeing each other. We both be doing
Yeah.
it.
So that is like my favorite
Mhm.
practice. But you also brought up mindfulness. What is mindfulness? Let's start there.
Mindfulness is my thing, okay? Because, I'm a somatic trauma therapist, and that's just based on mindfulness as well. So, mindfulness is just the practice of being present without any judgment or attachment to it.
Okay. And so how do you practice that? Like a lot of times people hear mindfulness and then think meditation and then they're like, I can't meditate. I can't stop my thoughts. And
Hmm.
then you're like, a lot of times I'm like, that's like relax your
That's not the
thought.
goal.
That's not the,
Your brain is doing what it's supposed
right. But
to.
how do you help people through that?
So mindfulness is what you want it to be. If mindfulness is going to Target and scrolling down the aisles And being mindful of the urges you want to purchase this, but then you stop yourself and you think about it and then you move on. That can be mindfulness too. Mindfulness depends on the person. Even us just grabbing this drink of water and just observing and describing and just participating in the whole experience and feeling how it feels on our hands, that is mindfulness.
But it sounds like it's intentional and it's complete presence. Like if you're in the aisle at Target, you're aware of your steps. You're aware of yourself pushing the cart. You're aware of what you're looking at. You're aware of your thoughts as that's flowing.
It's like you're aware of it and you're not attaching yourself to it. So it's very different from saying, I am a bad person, and saying, I notice that I'm thinking I'm a bad person. That's the difference between mindfulness and being present and not being present. Because when you are not being present, you're taking on your thoughts as true. In mindfulness, we come to learn that we are not our thoughts, we're not our emotions, we're not our behaviors, but we are the awareness of them. So we're higher than that. So it's important to notice, I notice I'm being really hard on myself. I'm thinking this, I notice I'm thinking that. That's the awareness. You want to separate yourself from your thoughts and your emotions. Yes, they are valid, but you are not those. So you need to practice mindfulness to help you separate yourself from them. And that's how you practice more self-compassion. I notice I'm thinking this. I also notice it may be this anniversary, so maybe I am a little bit harder or sadder on myself around this time. Or I notice it's just that time of the month, so I am a little bit emotional. That's okay. So let me practice some self-care. Maybe I take a long bath today. That is mindfulness. Listening to yourself, recognizing your patterns, recognizing your thoughts, and not taking them on as one, and observing them with non-judgment and not attaching yourself to them.
So what if someone is like, sometimes I can do that, but other times I just feel this spiral of like, I can't help but think those thoughts.
You just notice that.
And
just notice it and give yourself grace. And once you finally pull yourself out, you're just like, I noticed I really had a hard time this day. Let me show myself some love.
Yeah.
It's going to happen.
Yeah. And it's like being gentle with yourself to be like, that's okay. That's a moment. But how do you, a lot of what you shared, it's like, what if someone can't shift those thoughts of that let go, of that like detach from that?
It requires active and intentional practice, because we don't see the world as it is. We see the world as we are. And mindfulness requires you to intentionally practice mindfulness in your day regularly before it to become a habit, before it to become like second nature.
Like, what do you mean by that?
So for some people, that may be meditation. For some people, that may be going to Pilates. But you really want to learn how to practice mindfulness in your regular day-to-day. Like, let's say you sit down at your desk, you check in with yourself. It's like actual steps to it. You're supposed to observe, describe, participate, and then you do that non-judgmentally, mindfully, and effectively. So you observe, describe, and participate. You do those things one at a time. But when you do that one mindfully, non-judgmentally, and effectively, you do that all at once. So you're doing these things. You sit down at your desk. You observe. You type in. You observe. You sitting at your desk. You observe your backside sitting on the chair. You
How
feel
long
all
should
that.
this take?
It should be the entire time.
Like,
you
what do you
observe
mean?
your thoughts.
So give us a time frame. 1 minute, 5 minutes.
Well, starting out, you probably can only do it like for like a minute.
So, but each step, I mean.
Yeah, and you can, then after that, you describe what you observe, and then after that, you participate in the entire experience. And then while you're doing that all one mindfully, non-judgmentally, and effectively.
So when you describe, is that vocally, or is that just
whatever helps you? I say starting out, it helps to do it vocally, and that's when you start the I notice practice. I notice how my heater feels against my feet. I notice I'm thinking this, and as you do it more, you'll notice how you start to interpret your thoughts as true, and then you start to catch yourself. Like, you'll say like, "Oh, I notice I feel the heat on my feet, and it's too hot." That's a judgment. Let's pull it back. Just say, "I notice I feel the heat on my feet." You know what I mean? So I would say like practice it in your everyday thing. So like when you first sit at your desk, maybe do it for 5 minutes while you're checking your emails, things like that. And then like you got to wash dishes at night. Practice it while you're washing dishes. It's important to practice mindfulness in your everyday to day things. Like it's cool to do it in meditation and stuff like that. And it does help you build that muscle of mindfulness in your mind. But like you have to practice in your day to day things because that's where it matters.
Yeah. And then we get back to step 3.
Mm-hmm.
Can you take us through that one? So we first observe, we then describe.
And you participate. So participation is really about you mindfully choosing to participate in what's effective. So when you think about doing what's effective, that means doing things that's in alignment with your goals. So let's say you have to take a test. Observing and describing your resistance to taking this test is not going to be very effective.
Yeah.
But if you observe it and describe it quickly and then choose to mindfully participate in taking the test instead, that's effective.
Right.
You get what I'm saying? So participating is choosing to participate in things that's effective towards your goals.
So as you kind of went through those, I was like, but the everyday person, like participate, that seems like a longer time than observe and describe. But then when you sit down and you think about this mindful practice, sometimes people want this thing that's packaged up in the 5 minutes. And so how do you help them realize like that last part is that ing of like you're doing it still and it's working and keep practicing?
Well, with my clients, we don't hop. This is just a crash course. But with my clients in general, I just start out with observing. And we do that for a few weeks.
Okay.
And then once you get that down, we start describing. We do that for a few weeks, and then we start participating. So I would say break it down where you're doing one of them at a time. And then once you get one down, then move to the next step.
Right.
And then that's when you can work on the other steps, whereas you being non-judgmental, you're doing things one at a time, and then you're also being effective.
Okay.
Because that's the hard part. Being non-judgmental, naturally, as humans, we judge.
Yeah.
We are judge Judies. And it's okay, but it's just you need to recognize that you're judging and not get wrapped up in the judgment.
Can you tell, like when it comes to judging, I always say like the first person you have to stop judging is yourself. Like when people are like, I'm not judging, but once you stop judging yourself, it's so much easier to stop judging everyone else. Because I'm like,
because everyone is a mirror.
Yeah.
Because what we're judging is they're reflecting something on us that we don't like about ourselves, that we relate to them about. So once you're less harsh on yourself, you become less harsh on everybody else.
Well, I have one final question for you. When you think about the future of mental health, what are you excited that's happening?
I am excited about the awareness around mental health. I do think we are taking a step in the right direction of breaking the stigma, having these conversations. And I think that will continue to progress as leaders within the mental health community learns how to navigate this shift and help provide people with the resources and education to help them heal themselves. And when we say heal, it's more like accept themselves. Yeah. Because you never really heal, unfortunately. Yeah, it's funny. You just accept yourself and learn how to navigate your triggers and all that. That's really all it is.
Yeah, I remember this girl told me, I was dealing with the breakup at the time, and she was like, we're broken up after a month. I'm healed. I said, that's crazy because I've been healing for a little bit of time, but healing is just an embarking of awareness. Sometimes I feel like it's just awareness. Like, okay, you're on this journey. Every turn and bend is just you relearning yourself from self to self. So
Exactly.
Well, thank you, Devyn. It has been a pleasure having you
Thank
today,
you.
giving us all the mental health tips and tricks. Y'all, I was trying to pull it out because the goal is to go to therapy, not keep just like listen to the episode and like prescribe yourself. So,
Yeah, go to therapy.
how can people stay in touch with you?
You can follow me on all social media platforms at Sent from Devyn. Devyn spelled Devyn.
Okay. Well, thank you, Devyn.
Thank you for having me.